This is the Become the Lion podcast. If you are aiming to become the top in your industry, not second, not above average, the top, then you have come to the right place. Become the Lion will provide you with weekly insights and motivation needed from our guests on how to escape the common herd that society lives in. If you're looking to change your life, then get ready. Welcome to Become the Lion.
This is Trevor and Nicholas, and today on the show we have Julia Price. And Julia, for our audience out there who might be listening, do you mind giving them some context on who you are and what you're doing right now?
Sure. My name is Julia Price, and thank you, Trevor, for being up at this early hour to talk to me. That just shows how much hustle you have. I am a singer-songwriter who I've actually been doing that for, about 8 years, and then Vine happened, and that gave me a pretty big platform to reach a lot of audiences with. And so from there, I still do a lot of social media content and music, but I've sort of built more of a brand focused on empowering people to live the best life they can live.
I wanted to ask you, our company is called Become the Lion, but how did you become the lion in your own life? What do you attribute to your success?
I think that I learned very early on. I was a gymnast, and I learned through that there's not really, that no isn't really a thing. And I guess for me, there was always a different way. So if that meant training harder or taking a different approach, or just, maybe I was taller, so I wasn't really great at flips, but I was really good at twisting. So learning how to play into my strengths. But being an athlete from the age of 5 to 15 really, really taught me so much about discipline and committing to a vision and following it through. And I honestly think that that's where I got all of my confidence and my really big dreams from.
I wanted to ask you, how did you get started as a singer?
There wasn't a moment where I said I'm going to be a singer. It was actually kind of the thing that I always did. I just didn't think I could do it professionally. So I remember there are pictures of me sitting around a campfire. I'm from upstate New York, so we would head up to Vermont every year, my family and my neighbors, and I would bring my keyboard with batteries, and I'd sit there in a bikini, fresh out of the lake with all the other neighborhood kids, and I would just play, and I kind of forced them to sing with me. It wasn't like they had a choice. But then I never really thought that I would pursue it until I was working at Good Morning America behind the scenes. I started there when I was 20, and I really thought I was going to be a news reporter. I was just yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And somehow I just kept getting asked to do music things. And so a friend of mine was in town, and he was performing at the Bitter End, which is a really popular venue in New York City. And he asked me to open for him. And I did, and I loved it. And so I kept performing. And before long, some of the crew guys from Good Morning America came down to see me play. And they mentioned one of my shows the next day at Good Morning America, and Chris Cuomo was an anchor at the time, and he kind of overheard the conversation, and he pulled me into his office, and he said, "What do you do?" And I showed him my music, and he said, "Cool, we'll get you on the show." And that was after being there for 2.5 years and never, ever trying to, I didn't, try to network or get, it wasn't even on my mind. It just kind of happened. And after I was on the show, all of a sudden I had all this press, and with access to the internet, I was able to book my first tour, and I kind of had a decision, and I was like, I could either go for it now, or I could spend my life wondering what it would be like had I gone for this passion of mine. And so I went for it, and then it became that's when it really became oh, I can actually do this.
And I wanted to ask, when you said you were able to get perform with the Good Morning show?
Yeah. So Yeah. Was it? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask, I feel like that's like such a big thing. Did you ever have any fears going into it? Did you ever think of failure or anything like that?
Oh my God, yes, and I still do all the time. I think now I sort of, as I'm older and more mature, I kind of expect failures to happen, but now it doesn't feel like the end of the world. Whereas at that age, to have such a big opportunity like that, I mean, I didn't sleep for like 3 nights leading up to it, and I was really quiet on the show. And even Chris at one point was like, "You're really shy," and I was like, I'm just so scared. But I just did it, and of course, there are a million things I would have wanted to change after, but overall, it was kind of like, okay, I did it, I survived, I lived, and now, like, what's next?
And so you have people around you, they believe that you're going to become a news anchor, and then all of a sudden, you find this passion in singing. How did you get them to believe that you're a singer?
I mean, well, for my dad, I just had to show him that I, can get health insurance. But no, I think it was like anything. It was a process because I didn't, like I said earlier, I didn't really believe that I could do it as a career until I sort of set myself up in a way where I had no safety net. I didn't have an option to walk away from Good Morning America. I mean, if that's what you want to do, if you want to be a journalist at that age, I was like in it. And I could have done so many different things within the company. But it's like I got a taste of what it's like to really live in your purpose. And that's kind of how I felt when I was performing. And so to have that, it became so clear to me that that's what I wanted to do, that it didn't really matter when the setbacks came up or anything from my parents or friends or labels or anything. It went back to that same thing of I'd hear no, and it would make me want to work harder and get better and learn and study people who I admired and be like, well, why is it working for them? What do I need to do? So it sort of was like this obsession that just took over me. And I guess after a while, people were like, oh, she really is serious about this.
I like that. I like that a lot. Because I feel like a lot of times, someone in our audience might be listening and people would perceive them to have a different persona and they want to change that, They might be like a worker and then they want to become an entrepreneur and then that person and then everyone around them saying, hey, no, you're just a worker. And it almost like they think of themselves as a worker, but they don't understand that they can achieve bigger dreams.
Yeah, and I think I was actually just on, it's 5 o'clock here in Australia, 5 p.m. right now, and I spent the day on the beach with some friends, and one of them said that a lot of people in Australia have, I think he called it poppy syndrome, tall poppy syndrome, where if someone starts to rise, the people around them will kind of pull them down. And I was like, oh, I've never heard it called that, but I've experienced it. And I think just like we do that to ourselves too, it's like I'm this person, I have this identity, this is my label, and I can't even do it. It's like you're pulling yourself down. And so I think it's just like you have to just want something, you have to want change so badly that that inner voice will be louder than all of the other ones.
And what were some of the challenges that you had to overcome from that first time when you were on the Good Morning Show to where you are now?
Oh, so many. I think the biggest one was not thinking I was good enough and not thinking that, I don't have a voice like Adele. I'm much more in the realm of like Ellie Goulding and the singer-songwriter, like the John Mayer kind of. I mean, I love both of them, so I'm not like trying to inflate my ego by comparison. But the point is, like, I never really felt like, oh, I'm a singer. I was more of a storyteller. And so that was like totally self-imposed doubt that held me back in a lot of ways and created a lot of challenges where otherwise, had I been really confident, it probably would have been smooth sailing. But beyond that, I think little things. Like I remember I showed up to a venue in Sioux City, Iowa, after there was like a ton of radio promotion, and I was on their news station there, and I got to the venue and there was no keyboard, which is my instrument. So I was like, oh my God, so many people are coming and I'm on in an hour. And I could have totally freaked out, but instead the community kind of got together and they said, well, we have one at the church. So they had to get like the mayor to get someone to open the church, to like get the keyboard and get it to the venue. And so from there, I've had a million things happen like that, starting out, technical things to having to take side jobs when I didn't want to. I mean, it's not like I started and all the money flowed in. I remembered leaving Good Morning America, and 2 years later I was babysitting part-time and doing waitress gigs and stuff like that, and thinking, oh, this is never going to happen. What am I doing? And there's still, it's like, for me, it was always just looking at the alternative, going back to any sort of job that didn't really call me, and I was like, I can't do it. More challenges, that's fine. I know I can do it. But yeah, definitely a lot of ups and downs, that's for sure.
Do you think, you said you were a babysitter and you're working these part-time jobs that you may not necessarily like, and you also experience setbacks. Do you think this is a part of everyone's journey if they want to become successful?
I do. I think it looks different for everyone. I know that maybe a setback, if you're working a job right now, a corporate job, and you have a good salary and kind of all the perks that come along with it, you might be able to invest financially to have a safety net for a while. But I think even if it's not a financial struggle, it's still relatively new. And I think people go into, there's like this sort of way of thinking that as an entrepreneur, you're on your laptop and you're all over the world and you're traveling and it's fun and you have meetings at, whatever time you want. And that comes after a massive amount of grinding. And I really don't think you can be successful at anything without having those moments where you're just like, what am I doing? I can't believe how hard this is. I don't know if I want to do this. And then pulling yourself back up, because that's how you know that you really want it.
I find it funny, when people sometimes say that they start a business to have more freedom, when necessarily, like, right away, you're not going to have unless you're pretty lucky you create a great company right away, it's going to be a few, if not more, years of grinding.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you on that. I think I work harder for myself than I've ever worked for any boss.
Isn't that a great feeling, though? You're putting in the work for yourself rather than someone else like your boss, and I feel like it's almost like much more rewarding.
Oh, absolutely. Because it's at the end of the day, if you give it everything you have, but it's still yours, and even if it doesn't work out, it's still like, I did it for me rather than building someone else's dream.
I wanted to ask you, how were you able to believe in yourself?
I've had times where it's really easy, when there's a lot of momentum and opportunities just kind of flow in. And again, I think that for me just kind of goes back to the mentality that I learned when I was an athlete, when I was a gymnast, of, sometimes I remember whenever I would get to the next level, I'd have to relearn things and actually kind of get worse. And I think like the comparison business-wise is when you hit a plateau and you think like, okay, I've had all this flow and movement and now I'm plateauing and I'm stuck. And so those are the moments where I kind of go back to what I learned very early on as an athlete. Well, like that's going to happen before you get to that next level. So that being said, I also have really good friends around me now and people who are doing similar things who pick me up and remind me of why I'm doing this when I have a bad day or an off week or an off month. I've gotten rid of a lot of the people who didn't believe in me or held me back, because I know that I need a support system around me that's going to push me.
And, I feel like a lot of times someone in our audience might be listening, and they might be younger, college, high school, or whatever, and they have friends that don't believe in them. They don't believe in their dreams. How do you push yourself aside from those people and really move off on your own?
Yeah, I think you have to be okay with being alone for a little while. And kind of like you said before, when people say I'm going to be an entrepreneur and have all this freedom with starting a business, and you're like, oh, okay. It's because you also will spend a lot of time alone until you find people who understand you and are doing the same things. And I used to fill that void with friendships that didn't really work. And I realized that it would just slow me down, and it would hold me back so much that it got to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm going to let go of all this. I'm going to not call people back, and I'm going to, kind of move on with my life. And I felt really selfish and like a really bad friend. But all of a sudden, when I did that, all these new people just kind of like magically appeared in my life that were supportive and did believe. But I think it's knowing that that's okay, because you're doing something very different, and there will be periods of time where you might be alone, but that's okay, because the reward will be so much better quality of friends in the future.
I like that a lot, because I know for myself, when I was first starting off, it almost felt weird. It felt like I was being like the wrong one, going off and chasing my dreams. I'm sure that there's people in the audience listening who might feel the same way.
Oh yeah, I just was around. I don't know if you've heard of Caleb Maddox, but I got to speak on stage with him in London, and he's 15, and he is like one of the most inspiring people I've ever met, and he's got this sort of old soul wisdom. And I asked him, how do you make friends? Because I know at that age there are not a lot of people thinking like that. And he goes, honestly, I don't really have a lot of friends, but I love what I do, and the friends I have, they get me. There are a few people, and I'm okay with that, because I'm touching so many people, and I'm reaching so many people that it makes up for it. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's cool. I get it.
I've actually interviewed recently a 17 and a 16-year-old, and it just amazes me like how well they're doing entrepreneurship for like how young they are.
Yeah, and that's the time to do it if you can, because you have so much more energy than you do in your 20s, and then I'm assuming your 30s and 40s and 50s. It's like that's when I had the most energy, was when I was like 16, 17. So good for them. That is awesome.
I wanted to ask you, how did you become such a huge Vine star?
So I had been in the social media space I was pretty fresh to the game. There were a lot of big YouTubers at the time. And I was shooting a video for YouTube with my friend Taryn Southern, who is a YouTuber. And I said, we should invite Batch, and King Batch, who's now I don't know if he still is the biggest Viner, but he was for a very long time. I said, I think we should invite Batch to be a part of our music video, because he's doing this thing called Vine, and he's really excited about it, and I don't really know what it is, but it would be kind of cool to cross-promote. And so for me, I really honestly didn't know what it was, but I knew that people were starting to talk about it, and my intuition just was like, pay attention to this. And so he came on set, and we shot a few Vines, and I didn't think much about it. Actually, he made me download the app. I hadn't even downloaded it yet. And we shot some fun videos. I woke up the next day, and I had 7,000 followers on this app. And I'm like, oh, this is a real thing. And it's early enough that I can take advantage of that and just post as much as I can. And I did. So it was sort of like just paying attention to my intuition, and also surrounding myself with people who were already further along than me, and coming up with a collaborative way for both of us to get something from it.
And throughout that process, were you able to monetize it at all?
Yes, actually, it was the first time that I had really been paid for my music. I mean, I had songs, I'd had placements in film and TV, but that was a much different experience than working with brands on Vine, because there was a lot of money that the brands wanted to offer for basically just things that I did, that would take me half an hour to do max, sometimes 5 minutes. And there was so much creative freedom in that I loved it. Like I got to work with Gap and just go around with a photographer and shoot music photos in their clothes. And I was like, okay, I love this. Like, I didn't even expect to do stuff like this and get paid for it, but heck yeah.
I wanted to ask you, I know between Vine and social media, I know this can be a problem in the world sometimes, but how do you stay authentic when using social media?
That's such a great question. I actually had to take a little bit of a step back because I felt like while the Vine thing was awesome, it happened so quickly, and I was sort of transitioning into wanting to say deeper things and wanting to say bigger things because I had just done a lot of self-development work. And so I was going and doing these collaborations with people where it was comedic and it was playful and it was fun, but then I'd leave and I'd have this like anxiety feeling in my chest, and I didn't know why. And I realized that every single thing I was putting out, I was either like, it was dry humor, or it was like musical comedy, or it was just something that didn't feel like, it just felt disconnected from who I was. So I actually made a decision to take a little break and then come back when I really knew what I wanted to say. And that was maybe like a year and a half ago. And I feel like for me personally, it's the only way that I can enjoy what I'm doing, because even if you have money coming in at you and opportunities, if you're not being who you are, especially as an entrepreneur, someone who starts a business, someone who follows that so strongly, that sort of pull, it just wasn't, I couldn't even enjoy it. I mean, I'd have moments of enjoying it, but I was like, oh, I can't. So for me, it's like, it's not even an option. It's just like, okay, this is the message that I want to share. And if there's any part of me now that's like, well, do you really need to share that? I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do it, because I know that it's either ego or like, I think I look really good this day and I want to put something up, but like, I'm not really adding value. So I'm like, okay, I'll wait till tomorrow. And usually by the next day, I am like so moved on to the next idea that's not even relevant.
And I like where you talked about how, you had to take a break for a little while. And I know for myself, I've started a few companies, and it's like every company I've started and I've been in it for the money has failed. And then like the one company, like Become the Lion, is the one company where I didn't put money as the forefront. I just focused on making impact. And it's so much more enjoyable. I noticed like the money just comes in behind itself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you on that. 100%.
I wanted to ask you, how has passion allowed you to get to where you are?
I think passion puts up these sort of blinders. And I think of like the horses. I think they're race horses that wear them, like these blinders, so they can't get distracted by the other horses or what's happening around them. And passion has sort of just created those blinders naturally for me. Like sometimes it's like I won't sleep I'll fall asleep and get like 3 hours in, because I'm so excited about what I'm doing that I lose track of everything. And I think, like I've heard people say, I don't know what my passion is. I don't know what it is. And I'm like, yes, you do. We all know what it is. It's just whether or not you listen to it. And for me, my passion voice is just very bossy. And so I'm like, okay, I'll do whatever you say.
I want to ask you, how did you take the leap and follow your passion? And I know that's a big one for our audience, and sometimes they might be scared or be fearful of it.
Well, I think, and that's, for me, I really did want to be a reporter. And I think taking the steps to follow that calling, even though it wasn't the ultimate passion, which is what I'm doing now, it still got me there because I remember even to get that job at Good Morning America, I was traveling in Europe, and it was something that I had always wanted to do. And I was going to internet cafes to check my email and see if they got back to me about the internship, which it was very competitive to get. And I wasn't hearing back. And then I remember I actually called my grandma just to check in with her. And she goes, "Oh, did you hear back from the internship yet?" And I said, "No, I haven't." She goes, "Well, you message them again." And I was like, "Oh, okay, Grandma." And I did, and it's so funny because I actually got an email right away. "Hey, Julia, our internship coordinator actually quit in the middle of hiring people, and so we're starting fresh. So can you send your application again?" And I was like, "You've got to be kidding me." And I did, and I got the job. And then I was in Switzerland, and I had to walk up. I was in a tiny town. I had to walk up to some payphone. Literally, it's like the stories your grandparents tell where they're like, "I had to carry snow on my back for 8 miles." I had to walk up a hill and find this phone in the middle of nowhere and call and have an interview, and while there's cows walking behind me. And I didn't know why I needed to be there, but I just did. And now that I see the whole story and how it's unfolded, it wasn't necessarily the most passionate thing I wanted to do, but it led me to that because I just listened to that sort of voice that guides all of us. And yeah, I think that's ultimately what led me to everything that's happened in my life so far.
I have to ask, just out of curiosity, when you were on the interview, did you tell them where you were?
No, I didn't. I didn't know. I was 19, and I didn't really know how to have an interview. And so at the time, I remember I was like, oh my God, I was going to puke. I was so nervous, but I was just like, "Hey, okay, yeah, let's do this." It probably would have been better. Now I get it. People, they just want a real conversation. I would have just told them. But at the time, I wanted to seem all professional, Meanwhile, there's cows walking by me.
That's hilarious. I wanted to ask, how has self-development impacted your life?
So I grew up in New York, as I said, and that's not really a thing that my family is very traditional New Yorker family, kind of meet the parents, that dad in it who's really strict. So for me to go into self-development was not a natural thing, but this was around the same time that I was feeling really unfulfilled with just having a platform and not knowing how to use it. And so I started surrounding myself with people who were doing self-development work and learning about who Tony Robbins was and reading The Power of Now and all of that sort of stuff that I was kind of freaked out by because I was like, what is this? And the more I did it, I just felt so understood and so excited. And I also felt like the business part of me kind of kicked in and was like, oh, this is why you're where you are. And if you want to get to the next level, do these things and learn what your setbacks are so that you can improve them. And then I started to see how my relationships changed and just got better. And I felt lighter and everything sort of had an ease to it. And so now it's sort of become like a basic requirement for people in my life on a deep level. I feel like I know too much now. No, there's always so much to learn, but I feel like I can't have surface level conversations anymore because there's like so much that we can learn from each other if we're willing to go deep. And so for me, self-development has just opened that world. And I am so grateful. I'm so grateful that we have the tools that we have now as a society to just be better humans.
It's like once you find out about self-development, it's like you can never go back to like being a normal person. It's almost like it just has you trapped.
Exactly. You can't. You've seen too much.
And how can someone in our audience turn their pain into power?
Yeah, great question. So kind of talking about finding your passion and following it. And for me, I have a couple of things that beyond just that voice and the pure love of music, there was a lot of pain in music for me because I remember the first time I performed, my dad was like, oh, it wasn't performed. It was an original song that I wrote, which was like the first time I really showed who I was and really like poured out my soul. And I remember showing it to my dad and he's like, oh, that's not music and you should go listen to the Eagles. And I don't want to hear that again in my house. And so there's so much in that where I think I was fueled in a lot of ways because I had felt so rejected the first time I showed who I really was that it actually, it gave me this feeling of wanting to prove something, but it wasn't wanting to prove to other people, it was wanting to prove to myself. And so I realized in doing that how many people I was helping. And so that's kind of where the power came, is this limiting belief that all of a sudden turned into this like universal connecting art that people would say, oh, I've experienced that and I've felt that, and thank you for this song because it helped me through this time. And then it just became bigger than me. And still, like when I have something that's really painful in my life or something or someone who's going through a situation, it's my natural inclination is just to write about it and to take that experience and put it into something that can help other people. Because I think ultimately we feel better as humans when we're able to help someone else. And that helps us to help ourselves.
Do you think a lot of times when people are starting out, they almost like undercut themselves in what they can actually accomplish?
Yeah, I think not even just when we start out. I think it's kind of like a lifelong thing. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to watch, is when you see someone who's like, oh my God, I see people who are more talented than me all the time, and they just don't do anything with it. And, you know, at this point in my life, I've learned you can be supportive, but also know when someone's just not willing to go there, and to save yourself a lot of energy and kind of walk away. But I think, yeah, when you're starting out, you don't necessarily have a lot of people around you who can serve as an example to show that it's possible. So it can be really scary.
Julia, this interview has been excellent so far. And now we're going to enter the Lions round, where I'm just going to ask you a couple of quick questions before we end the show today.
Ooh, pressure's on. Okay.
What would you tell someone who's just starting out and going after their dream?
Trust your gut and trust your dream. Trust that you have that dream for a reason.
I like that. I like that a lot. And it's almost like sometimes people, they know what they want, but they almost hold themselves back because they're almost scared of what others might think of them. But I feel like everyone deep down inside knows what their passion is, or over time they'll eventually find it, and they have to just let it be free.
Yes.
What 2 or 3 books would you recommend our audience to read?
I love Tuesdays with Morrie. It's by Mitch Albom. It's the life of a dying man. He's dying from ALS, and his perspective on how you can live every day to the fullest is just it stayed with me for years and years. And I also really like the book How to Be a Badass by Jen Sincero. It's just dry, funny self-development, but it's based around having action steps and a plan that can just make you a badass. She doesn't hold back. I like that.
Is there a show with Tuesdays with Morrie?
I don't know. If there is, though, I would have to watch it.
I think there is. I think I remember watching the show. I don't think I've read the book yet.
The book is so good. Oh my God, so good. You're gonna cry.
I don't know. I'll definitely have to check it out. And last question of the day. Where can our audience find you?
So most of my social media is at Julia Price Music. My YouTube is Julia Music 1 with the number 1. And pretty much you can Google Julia Price Music and a bunch of stuff will come up. Spotify, iTunes, everything. Just all of it.
And Julia, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time today to speak with our audience.
Oh, thank you guys so much for listening, and hopefully you can learn some of the lessons easier than I've learned them.
Thanks for listening to Become the Lion. Everything from today's show will be in our show notes on our website. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Till next week, don't stop grinding.